Let's face it, when you saw the trailer for Netflix's newest movie, Eurovision Song Contest, you thought, another Will Ferrell movie? Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome to an all-new Talkin' Movies. As always, I am your host, the real Gino Reynolds, and today we're going to be talking about Netflix's newest movie, Eurovision Song Contest, the story of Fire Saga, starring Will Ferrell and Rachel McAdams. Now, I have to admit that I thought I'd heard of Eurovision, but I couldn't tell you I knew anything about it. But I know that the filmmakers thought the title for this movie was stupid until they realized, hey, this is a real thing. I will warn you, there's probably going to be some spoilers in this review, but if you don't want any spoilers, shockingly enough, being that Will Ferrell's track record with me isn't the greatest, I'm going to recommend this one. Is it the greatest movie ever? No. Does it have a little bit of heart, though? Is it entertaining? Does it not totally parody this event? Yes, it's got a lot going for it, even though it's not perfect, and there is a little bit of that Will Ferrell flavor that you don't like. But there's also some heart to it, and there's some fun to it, and some decent humor, and some fun characters, and some decently good music, even though a lot of it's not really my taste. But other than that, I mean, other than just a few things I didn't like, I pretty well enjoyed this movie. So I would recommend it. Now, if it were in theaters, I probably would be a little less forgiving, but since it's on Netflix and if you need a break, you can take a break. If you need to watch this movie at your own pace, you can. And plus, if you've already got the subscription, you're not paying for it. So, it's one of those that, yeah, if it were in the theaters, I'd probably be like, I think it would have been fine, but I would have liked it a little less because I had paid for it. What this movie is about, it's about Lars and Sigrid, played by Will Ferrell and Rachel McAdams. Ever since Lars was a kid, he wanted to take part in the Eurovision Song Contest, which again is a real thing. Also, Sigrid, she has a thing for Lars and has for a long time. They've known each other since they were kids. They've been in a band called Fire Saga together, and she's in love with him. And while deep down he loves her, he's kind of a moron, so he doesn't see that she's in love with him. Of course, you know where the story's going, but they get a chance, let's just say how can I put this? They get a chance to go to Eurovision because of a national tragedy, I guess we'll say. And so they represent Iceland at Eurovision, and then we see how that affects their relationship, their friendship, especially when both of them get chances with other people and things like that. So it's basically looking at these two's relationship as friends, possible lovers, their chances at winning Eurovision. See, they're this local band that they have a song, I believe it was called Jaja Ding Dong, and the lyrics, yeah, the name of the song should, they're talking about making things get wide and long. You know where this is going. They're known around their small town for this song, even though they want to present other songs to people. They're like, no, sing Ya Ya Ding Dong, right? But yeah, they somehow, again, national tragedy, get a chance to go to Eurovision. When it comes to parody, which this movie, I wouldn't call it a full-blown parody. It's not a satire either. But I'd call it more of a parody, maybe a half parody. Because yes, it's parodying Eurovision from what I've read up on Eurovision after this. There are people that are in this movie and bands in this movie that took part in Eurovision or are inspired by bands in Eurovision. So there's a lot of research that went into this movie to make it really feel like this Eurovision contest. So, but they're not exactly making fun of all of them. I mean, they're making a little bit of fun of some of the performers. Dan Stevens plays this Russian performer who I guess you could call him maybe a pseudo villain. You kind of feel like his heart might be in the right place, and there is a little bit of politics involved with his character being from Russia, with what happens to his character, and you can kind of see it right from the start. If you don't see it right from the start, you're just like, I can't believe the reveal about his character would blindside you after the first time you see him. But it plays into one of those "this isn't allowed in Russia" kind of things. And at a point, you think he's kind of the villain, even though there's another character you're like, he's the real villain. Because there's this whole thing with Iceland. I guess if you win Eurovision, you host Eurovision the next year, and Iceland's like, well, we're going to send somebody, but we can't afford to win because we're broke and we can't afford to throw on Eurovision the next year, so it would ruin us. And you kind of see where the guy that's leading that charge is going to be the real villain, even though he doesn't really do enough until near the end of the movie to try to thwart this thing from happening, even though you find out some things that happened earlier in the movie was because of him. One of the funniest parts of the movie is because of him. It was that national tragedy I referred to. I should have saw it coming, and now that I think about it, it's like, yeah, I probably, in a way, subconsciously kind of saw the national tragedy coming. Didn't make it any less funny, though. It was probably one of the biggest laugh out loud moments for me. So you've got a couple villains in this. Will Ferrell's character, Lars, he's trying to follow his dreams ever since he was a kid. Of course, his dad, played by Pierce Brosnan, who's like the ladies' man of the town. There's this running joke that Lars and Sigrid could be brother and sister, even though she like fully denies it the entire time. That being said, Pierce Brosnan's character apparently got with a lot of ladies around town, so the argument is somewhat justified, even though a reveal at the end kind of answers that question fully for you. So they've got this whole thing with Will Ferrell and Pierce Brosnan's characters having this, he doesn't think his dad's proud of him, and he says he's wasting his life. There's a part in the movie where Sigrid's like, maybe he didn't really mean it. He goes, no, he said it this way, and it was like the exact quote, "You disappoint me," and things like that. So there's that story going on as well. Of course, there's the are they or are they not going to fall in love story. So there's a lot of cliche in this movie. That being said, since this movie didn't go full-blown Will Ferrell, let's do jokes 1,000% of the time, and most of them aren't funny type of Will Ferrell movie, it doesn't do that. So, and don't get me wrong, there are moments where you're just like, okay, you can move on from this joke, right? There's a joke. See, this movie has, and I'm sorry I'm jumping all over the place, but this movie had a lot going on. There is some talk about myths and legends and the supernatural in this movie, where this movie could have went full-blown stupid ridiculous, and it probably would have hurt it a lot. But they keep that stuff subtle, even though one of them's pretty pointless. There's a scene involving a ghost trying to warn somebody of something, and they only go to this like maybe 2-3 times, and it gets to a point where they're just like, yeah, that already happened. Where have you been? You're the most useless ghost ever. It was kind of not a great joke, but I'm glad they just didn't like force it down our throat the entire movie. Sigrid, Rachel McAdams' character, believes in the Icelandic elves. That plays into a possible romance with somebody else. And I didn't know where they were going to go with that, but I knew they were going to do something with it, and they did. But here's the good thing. I mean, this movie has, I would say, I liked the laughs in this movie more than I didn't. Again, there were some pretty flat jokes, but I thought that they were keeping it tame enough from, like, say, the Holmes and Watson movie or something. They weren't keeping, it wasn't like that. It was just more subtle jabs, and I thought some of the jokes were a little more intelligent than, say, that movie. Well, the laughs were really working for me. What really worked for me and made this feel like, it had me looking it up, is this a real story? Like a ridiculous look at a real story, because a lot of the music in this movie, there's a couple times where the songs, like, you know, the song I mentioned before, the Jaja Ding Dong, and then there was a singer in this, and he was like the modern day Viking or something like that. There was a few performers and songs that were kind of ridiculous, but when you get to the Eurovision, a lot of the people you see in some of the scenes, like they have this whole sing along scene, and it's like, I know I've seen some of these people before, and sure enough, some of them are popular singers or YouTubers and things like that. Plus, like Demi Lovato's in this movie. I couldn't tell you a Demi Lovato song to save my life, but I know who she is. So when she's in this movie, she's not in it a ton, but she's in it. So there's people that you know, or you could tell that this was inspired by something. And from what I understand, like, some of the bands were inspired by past winners of Eurovision. For example, there is a band in this called Moonfang. And first of all, if I were a judge at Eurovision, Moonfang would have won, in my opinion, even though it would have ruined Will Ferrell's movie. But you first notice them because, as someone that grew up in the Beavis and Butthead era, this band, Moonfang, looks like Gwar, right? And it's like, okay, I like these guys. It's like, I can't remember how someone, I was reading an article how someone explained them. Oh, here it is. This band Moonfang was based on a band called Lordy, who won one of the years, and the quote about them is, "What if Kiss were just friendly metalheads with socialized medicine?" So yeah, I see this band, I'm like, oh cool, they look like Gwar, but they are based on a real band called Lordy. And their song, Moonfang's song, Running with the Wolves, they only play it for a little bit, but I'm like, this is the kind of song I probably would have voted for, if it were me. So there's all sorts of, like I said, a lot of the music in this movie isn't for me, but I appreciated that, and I read some articles about the filmmakers. They're like, we can't have just these stupid, silly songs. We can have a couple, but we got to have songs that could actually win this contest. We want it to really feel like the contest, and that the ridiculous story is Will Ferrell and Rachel McAdams' story, where they're kind of coming into this just regular situation, not just everything's ridiculous, 100% of the time. Like, again, Holmes and Watson, or Watson and Holmes, whatever that movie is called. I don't care to really remember because I couldn't stand that movie. But yeah, some of the songs are ridiculous. Like, Dan Stevens' song is kind of silly, even though it's done really well. It plays into his character reveal and everything at the end. But I really dug that they put a lot of thought and feeling in making this music feel real, and making this feel like a real contest versus, it's just a bunch of silly songs and everything's silly. We gotta laugh because this is a Will Ferrell movie. Ha 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 ha. No, they made it feel like that the characters were coming into this real situation, this real contest, and that's why I think I really dug the movie, is because it just kind of, it didn't make everything silly. It took some things, well, not totally serious. It made it feel like it could have been real life. So yeah, when it comes to this movie, with it being on Netflix, it's well worth a watch. Again, if it were in theaters, I probably still would have liked it, but probably not as much. But that being said, Netflix, even though it's a little over 2 hours, I thought maybe it was a little too long. it still was a really fun watch for me, especially for free at home. So yeah, I can recommend this movie, even if Will Ferrell has turned you off. And this isn't the best Will Ferrell movie. I'd have to go through Will Ferrell's catalog to really say that, but it's not like a Holmes and Watson situation here. It's one that you like the characters, even though there is some silly stuff. Some of the music's pretty decent. Again, Moonfang would have won if I were voting. But Eurovision Song Contest, The Story of Fire Saga, is definitely a decent Will Ferrell movie, and I'm a fan of Rachel McAdams too, so them together were kind of fun. Their love story works. I mean, there's a lot of cliche in this movie. Don't expect a ton of originality when it comes to plot and everything else, and there is a lot going on. But still, this for me, I can recommend it mostly because if you've already got a Netflix subscription, you don't have to pay for it. So anyway, that's going to be all for this edition of Talkin' Movies. If you like what you've heard here, please subscribe to the Real Gino YouTube channel. Like this video. If you have anything to say about Eurovision Song Contest, Story of Fire Saga, please feel free to leave a comment in the section below. Until next time, I am your host, the Real Gino, Gino Reynolds. Ya ya ding dong.